Hello and welcome to today's virtual Coffee Talk webinar. My name is Margaret. I will be your web host today. We have a few housekeeping announcements and then I will introduce our speakers. As a reminder, in order to earn CPE credit for today's session, please stay connected to the webcast for the entire program and participate by responding to at least 3 of the 4 interactive polls. Second, there will be a course evaluation which will open in a new window upon exiting the webcast at the end of the program. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Kevin Jacobs is a managing director with Alvarez & Marsal Tax in Washington, D.C., and the National Tax Office practice leader. He brings more than 15 years of experience in tax matters in both the public and private sector. Cody Dixon is a managing director at Alvarez & Marsal Tax LLC in Dallas. He brings more than 17 years of experience helping clients design and implement tax technology solutions. Finally, Kevin DeYoung is a lead product manager with Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting. He will be showing us today how to find additional answers and resources using CCH Answer Connect. Thank you. And Kevin, take it away.
Great, thanks. And thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. Today's topic is very timely because it seems like you can't go and open a newspaper, read an email, search a website without some information coming at you about the latest and greatest about AI. And even if you don't know that AI is impacting your day, it's working behind the scenes. And so appreciating what is AI, generative AI, and how does it play, and how can it actually make your life easier and possibly more complex. And so we have a rather fun agenda, and I'm very excited that Cody Dixon is here to tell me all the things I never wanted to know and then some about what is generative AI and should I be scared? But also, what is prompt engineering? How will it impact our tax compliance? And at the end, Kevin DeYoung is going to show us how we can get additional information for at least one of the other topics that we'll be discussing of using a generative AI that's going to sort of say, okay, this is what it's telling us, but now I want to learn more. So with that said, we're going to launch right into our first polling question. Again, in order to qualify, you need to make sure that you answer the polling questions, and it's pretty straightforward and simple. Have you experimented with generative AI yet? A, yes, B, no, or C, I've never heard of generative AI. And it seems like it's a loaded question because we haven't really gotten into what is generative AI as of yet, but we'll just sort of level set and start talking about that while the poll is still open. So I guess, Cody, if you had to sort of at a high level start describing for the audience, what is generative AI? What would you say?
Well, thanks, Kevin. So for generative AI, this is artificial intelligence tools that are used to generate text, images, or any sort of content that could be analysis insights to help you do your job. And all of this is facilitated through a prompt. And maybe just to step back for just a quick second to give a quick journey for myself. So when these tools kind of emerged, I would say that I wasn't an immediate believer. I was a little bit of a skeptic. And so part of me jumping into this webinar and talking about generative AI is to talk a little bit about my journey and how we've gone from not knowing too much about these tools, but to knowing a lot and then looking at how we can implement them within the tax function. And but at a basic level, what we're going to do today is talk about what generative AI is, and this is a quick model for us to see how this all works. So you have your user at the top, and then you've got a couple of prompts down here. So this being tax compliance busy season, or at least getting right into it, you've got a prompt to generate an image that says a tax accountant working on a tax return as an office. In an office as the sun goes down, and then boom, your generative AI tools, they're going to generate that picture for you down there on the bottom. You can use that in your slide decks, your marketing, and all the other things that are out there. And then probably the normal use case that we're seeing a lot of this is doing some silly things with AI. So again, looking at tax compliance. If you haven't written a haiku in a while, this is a great place to refamiliarize yourself with it. But you can ask these tools to write a haiku on the tax compliance process, and there you go, you have it down there. Numbers on paper, tax forms dance with ink and math, compliance prevails. And there you have your haiku. But what for these tools, the main driver for this is the prompt. The prompt really is kind of the key, and we'll talk a little bit. That's why we're going to talk a little bit, not just about generative AI. Generative AI in and of itself, we'll talk about that, but also what is the prompt engineering, because that's really what's driving your result is these prompts. If you give it in general, if you give it a good prompt, you get a good response. If you give it a bad prompt, you get a bad response. So we're going to look at that a little bit more later as well.
You know,
But
Cody, it would be interesting on this picture if the picture changes as it gets much closer to the filing deadline. Because right now this person's smiling versus
yes,
I just didn't know if you think the generative AI will be able to pick up on the filing deadline as far as the pictures. But just so you're aware, and you know, from the audience's perspective, 31% have actually experimented with generative AI, and 60% have not, and another 9% haven't heard of it, and they're learning about it. So this is a
great.
great place to sort of, you know, what you're saying is really helpful in the sense of, okay, well, I have this prompt, what do I want to do? And we're going to have some fun conversations about the prompts, and if I switch the ordering of the words, I may not get the same answer, and so the
That's correct.
specificity of a prompt is going to be really important, and so really
Yeah.
thinking about that is going to be key.
Yeah, it's going to be the key to success or failure with a lot of these, as well as introduce you to the process, the whole process as a whole. So but yeah, because we have a basic profile for us, this will be a good use case to talk about why are we talking about this? What is all the buzz? You know, Kevin has sent me 3 or 4 emails a week for the last month about how these tools are being integrated, how people are thinking about it. It's, as he mentioned, it's all over the news. It's everywhere that you're looking. But as a brief history, so on November 30th, 2020, ChatGPT was launched. And then by February 4th of 2023, ChatGPT had over 100 million users. So your chart on the right really helps illustrate what it was able to accomplish in comparison to other technology platforms that are out there. So I personally am not a TikTok user, but I hear it's very popular, and it did in 2 months what TikTok took to do 9 months. And so you're seeing the rapid adoption of this, of people getting in and using these tools and technologies with very regularly. And as of now, you're starting to see day by day more and more people adopting ChatGPT, as well as or using these types of large language models, because they become a little bit more mainstream. And part of this is what you're seeing in the market now too, is if you look at domain registrations and things that are out there, this is kind of the number of daily domain registrations for the domain.ai. So you can see it's kind of hitting a steady pace up until about the end of November 2022, and then it's pretty much doubled in terms of AI registries. So you're seeing a flood of people try to take existing tools that they have and put them under the AI umbrella, as well as look at launch and starting new businesses that are powered and fueled by generative AI. Part of the reason for this is because OpenAI, as well as a lot of these AI tools, they've designed these tools to be set up as a platform as opposed to a standalone service. So they're designed not just to go to ChatGPT, log in, type in your prompt, get what you need and get out, but they're also designed so that you can take that process of prompting and put it within your own applications that are out there. You're seeing this again. We'll talk more about this, about what's coming in the fall this year with the wave of AI tools and technology, and how that will impact our practice. And just kind of jump through this. I think the Marketunist, if you're not familiar with him, I think he captures this very, very well. But basically, everybody is looking to adopt generative AI in their tools, including tax. And so you have the Marketunist here. What will the impact of ChatGPT be on our business? And so there's a lot we don't know for sure, like how much of it it says is made up, or if it'll take away our jobs, or the security risks, or if it'll damage our reputation. But what do we know for sure? Well, the only thing that we know is that we want to adopt it everywhere as fast as we can. And again, if out what you're seeing in the wild, that seems to be the trend. All the software companies and software providers, they're looking and researching this and trying to put this into different tools. And I think the Markettunis captures this brilliantly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, it's kind of interesting because this isn't the first time we've seen sort of open source data, right? It used to be, we can go back to old school of, when I was in school, we did our research by reading encyclopedias, right? And we would be doing our research by books, heaven to Betsy, books. But now it's like, now you go on the internet and you search these things and it's like, okay, what is the source of that? And this is really one of the issues that I know that's associated with this, which is, as noted, how much of it is made up? Where are they getting this data from? Is it, are they talking to my 11 or 13-year-old to give tax advice, or are they talking to someone that's been like a retired professor? So you can see, there's nothing that says, oh, this statement was ran by X, Y, or Z. And so depending on the implementation and who's implementing it, just even having that quality of data. So we've talked about, and we're going to talk about, like, the prompts and how important the prompts are, but it's also the underlying data and how you utilize it. That's going to also be key. And a lot of people are playing catch up, and it's really a matter of, hey, let's just adopt. But you also need to appreciate what are some of the possible ramifications of early adoption, as well as what are the possibilities of not becoming an early adopter.
Right, and yeah, as things move very fast, we're going to try to stick to the things that we think we're going to be doing here a year from now with prompt engineering and other things along those lines. But yeah, but just to give a quick brief history on artificial intelligence and tax, so what's new for us is the very middle of this graphic, the large language models. That's really kind of the new technology that's emerging with ChatGPT, Bard, and other language models that are out there, where you're able to put in queries, get answers back. And Kevin, to your point, is that you get an answer back, but you still have to go through the process of validating the sources of that, as well as the quality of the answer that comes from that. Sometimes you can change your prompt. Sometimes you may need to look at different sources, or maybe even go old school and go back to a book. Who knows? So, but for artificial intelligence, it's not new. There's been within the technology realm, we've been using artificial intelligence for different areas. A big area that I've seen throughout my career is classification models. So either taking data elements, for fixed assets, this was always a big one. You're looking at descriptions or types of assets that are put in systems, and you're seeing large volumes of data over time. You're making decisions based off of that, or tax professionals are making decisions based off of that data, and putting that into a model that you can then run through there. So it says, hey, based off of the training data that you gave it, it's going to come up with the right depreciation life or classification. So based off of that, we've seen those types of tools in the market for a while, and people who are using those as well. We've also seen other machine learning models that are there in terms of extracting data. So if you have a lot of K1s, if you by blending the face of the K1 with the white pages and so forth, like there's other models that are out there and software providers that are using artificial intelligence and machine learning to get to the information that's there. But what's new is these models. These models present unique opportunities for us to do something a little bit different, especially with the generative AI, because in this case, you can generate content, answers, responses, and so forth. And so this is where we think that, or where I'm starting to see a little bit more where this might be a very interesting use case for tax. There's the concern with, is it right? Is it making things up? Yes, we have to validate those. That's going to be out there. But the reality of it is you can put in prompts and you can get decent responses that come out of those, and then you can fine tune those prompts to get better responses. And so we think that these large language models that mimic human-like intelligence and knowledge, they're going to be the most relevant for tax.
Yeah, so and it's interesting, right? Because, and we're going to talk about a use case in just a minute, but I'll turn to it, but sort of highlight some of the fun questions of, if I went there and I said, hey, what's new in 2023 for federal income tax? The stuff that you may get is rather interesting. There's some new provisions that I've never heard before in my life, that I got told are there. So, I'm not heavily concerned about those. But you then say, okay, how does the tax law change from 2022 to 2023? You'll get something totally different, that may not also apply. And I, in fact, got told that we even had a new state, because they told me that there was a new state that had a new state tax code. So just so you know, there's a new state coming as announced by the generative AI. So again, it's a matter of trying to make sure
Yep.
you this isn't your one-stop shop of like, okay, we're done, but it is definitely something that can be used and be helpful in actually providing stuff. And I think this use case that you put together is a great example.
Yeah, and this kind of represents a more mature use case for an organization. So if you're putting together your 2022 tax return, maybe you have, a memo that you draft with it that has insights that you are going to provide to your stakeholders and so forth. And you go to 2023 and you can now use the generative AI to say, look, compare these two, because now that you have your data points in a standardized format for you to look at, you can say generate insights comparing the 2023 tax year to the 2022 and see what you get. So one of the things that, Kevin, this is not made up, I believe this is real. So what you've got here, you've got a scenario where it says while your fixed asset additions remain consistent between 2022 and 2023, according to TCJA, starting on January 1st, 2023, the 100% bonus depreciation phases out by 20% each year until it's fully phased out in 2027. So you're able to start generating some of these insights that are there. Again, you're not necessarily, you may or may not be using these tools to complete the tax return, but you are using these tools to help create content to help explain what's going in the tax return to other individuals. And I think this represents a good use case for a lot of investments that people have done. It's easy to kind of take generative AI and inject it into existing processes to get value, and then also not introduce new risk. So if you're not wanting to use this to generate compliance, but you might want to look at it generating insights, this is a good use case for you.
Yeah, Cuddy, and as far as whether or not this is accurate, we could keep everyone on the edge of their seats and say Kevin DeYoung is going to show us answer connect and confirming that the changes on 168K. But it is also interesting. So if I got this insight, at least if I'm going to be speaking to my client or putting together a memo, this isn't going to be the end all be all, right? In the sense of there's no numerical analysis. It's sort of saying, oh, okay, well, my fixed asset additions were stagnant, but I had a reduction in depreciation, but it didn't necessarily even tell me, okay, what was the magnitude of that that difference in depreciation? And so you would have to ask presumably a follow-up question. And so it's really this really interesting give and take of, okay, based off of this information, what am I trying to glean? And in some regards, it's very helpful because it's like, okay, got it. My fixed asset additions remained consistent. That's good to know. I can now start asking, what is the amount of my depreciation? What was the tax consequences associated with that? If I'm still not paying tax, do I really care? But the other question is, how many other insights is it providing?
Yep.
And there's limitations on how much data it normally provides. It's not going to spit out like a term paper on every single, like, hey, tell me, the meaning of life. But you start thinking about, is it going to pick out the key ones? But at least it helps you start thinking about, here you go. And the more specific the ask, assuming you get the prompt right, the more helpful it will be, right? So I can ask the generic, but it gives me some. But then if I can start asking the specific, I can start playing with, okay, well, instead of me having to open up the 2022 return and the 2023 return, or just starting to compare back and forth, like, okay, how much did my depreciation change? Okay, what was the amount of my depreciation expense? What was my amount of my additions?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's interesting. There's the large language models for math are not the strong point at this point in time. So this is where we're starting to see creative folks come up with different prompt messages or different prompts for after this to kind of facilitate teasing out the numbers that you would need to help complete those analysis and so forth. So yeah, so kind of with that, let's jump into prompt engineering, because what's fascinating here to me is that not only on November 30th the ChatGPT launch, what ended up happening is I think the whole world got a new skill set and a new responsibility, and that is prompt engineering. So, and prompt engineering at basic definition is crafting inputs to large language models to achieve desired outputs. So usually that's just entering in what you want to accomplish and then evaluating what you received out of these large language models to be a desirable response or not. You've seen the thumbs up or the thumbs down on a lot of these responses that are used to kind of gauge whether or not you achieved what you wanted to. And we're going to go through a couple good and bad examples that we have from prompt engineering. But what's fascinating on this as well is a lot of the language models that you can have access to, especially this example here on screen was run on ChatGPT or GPT-4, but with the knowledge cutoff as of September 24, if you ask it to please provide a definition of prompt engineering for you, well, as of September 21, there isn't a definition of prompt engineering, like it doesn't exist. So and you can see, to Kevin, your point, however, it can say, hey, I'm trying to, he's asked about prompt engineering, it doesn't exist, so let me maybe make something up for him to do that. And so you can see some of the power of these tools and the creativity that's there. But also you need to kind of go through this with the right perspective as you either adopt or utilize these within your practice, and make sure that you're keeping things set up so that you're in a position of success as opposed to a position of risk, which again we'll talk about here in a little bit.
Yeah, and it's fortunate that here it even identifies the knowledge cutoff, right? Because some places it does and some places it doesn't, and
right.
You can imagine what would happen if you're asking for an answer for tax law and they don't tell you as of September 21st. It's not 2021, but they're giving you a tax answer. But and again, I guess Cody, people are asking, and feel free to chime in with questions if you can sort of redefine or repeat the definition of prompt engineering, and because clearly GPT wasn't able to provide one. So in your mind, how would you define it?
Yeah, so prompt engineering is a new discipline where we are crafting inputs into large language models to achieve desired outputs. So you are creating a response or creating a question or providing a statement. Usually this is text into a large language model in order to get the desired output. For tax purposes, we think this is largely going to be around text generation. I don't think you'll need too many image generations for tax compliance in any way along those lines, but that is the discipline that it's around. It's in something new that's introduced with these models. In order to utilize them, you have to interact with it, and this is the way you interact with the large language models, is through prompts. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through a kind of a real life example. I've changed the names in this that we utilize with my team. So a couple weeks ago we had an offsite with our team to go over, and we're going to divide into 3 groups and go through and do an exercise together for team building. And so I've changed the names here so that it's to hide everybody's identity. But essentially, let's say in this example, what do I want to do? I want to take 15 people and I want to divide them into 3 teams. And so you can see I've got 3 teams or 3 families. So you've got the Starks, the Lannisters, and the Targaryens. And so we're going to put these together and we say, well, hey, we want to divide these people into 3 groups to get to know each other for a team building exercise. And so this is an example of a bad prompt. So you go in and you say, hey, like, I want to please divide this list into 3 teams of 5 people. And this is what we put in. You list out the 15 people. And what does it do? Well, it just takes the list and it more or less takes the first 5 people and puts those folks or all the Starks in one team, and then all the Lannisters in one team, and then all the Targaryens in another team. Not exactly what I was wanting. So what's wrong? Is my prompt wrong, or do I need to change things? So what do? We try another prompt. So Now in this case, I say, please divide the list into 3 teams of 5 random people. So give it the same list. The data hasn't changed. I've changed 1 word, Kevin, just like we did, and I get a different output. In this case, I do get 5 random people, but it's choosing a random person out of 15 each time. So you see you've got Ned on multiple teams. Ned can't be on multiple teams, neither can Daenerys and others. So we want them on different teams. So what do I got to do? I've got to change my prompt yet again. And again, we change it and says, please divide this list into 3 teams of 5 random people without repeating a name, and every name must be used once. And now I get the desired output that I want. So this really is designed to illustrate some of the challenges that we have with these large language models and really the discipline of prompt engineering. Asking it to do something for you is going to be a challenge, and you're going to need to figure out how to prompt these models in certain contexts for the desired output that you want. And so in this case, you may be thinking, well, this is not, you shouldn't be using ChatGPT for this. And the answer to that is absolutely. No, we should just number off in the room, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and divide up. But this is just to illustrate that, these tools are capable of doing a lot of these things, but you have to understand that there's a science or a design for how you get to achieve results that you want, and that is the prompt engineering. Changing the prompt changes everything. And so when you don't get the desired result, you're left with, what do you do next? Like, what's the issue? How do we fix or solve that?
Yeah, I mean, and I take your point. Yeah, you have 15 people, you're in a room, you can easily number them, but you can see, for those that do audit, they could say, okay, I want to try to figure out a statistical sampling. So they could say, hey, we have these bazillion accounts, randomly give me the, X amount. And so you can use that AI to start doing that, or they could start sorting them of, give me the top 5% of these, characteristics. And so there's a lot of sampling that they could potentially do. And it's definitely there, but I think as highlighted by this example, it really is, making sure that you are clear and concise with the terminology. It reminds me of back in the day when I was doing text research, right? We had the terms and connectors searching, and you had to make sure that if I used, the exact right term, or did I put the term in quotation marks, you get totally different answers. And that's where we are.
Yep.
Right? In the sense of, like, you wouldn't necessarily think that you would have to say random if I say I have 15 people, I want 3 teams of 5. You wouldn't think that. But then you say, oh, wait a minute. But as you noted, if I don't have this, and if I don't think of, like, I need to say without repeating a name, and every name must be, and so in some regards, when I think of utilizing it, I'm like, imagine you're talking to a very young child who's going to do exactly what you said, and only what you say. And you have to, and this is one of my favorite quotes I do tell my kids all the time is, you have to mean what you say and say what you mean.
Yep.
And you really got to do it. And if you do
Yep.
that, you might be typing a really long prompt for something very simple.
That's correct. Yeah, and that's really kind of the dynamic there. And to some extent, it's not a general rule that, like, a longer, more verbose prompt gets you exactly what you want. But there is a science into asking it what you're trying to accomplish and getting the different responses. So yeah, it definitely there's definitely some challenges that are there that come out of this. And we talked a little bit about the underlying answers changing if you put in the same prompt week over week. And so there's this concept of learning that's happening within the models and how you go about figuring out, like, what the challenge is. And really, I put this together because, to me, this kind of summarizes a little bit of the challenges that we're seeing with these tools and how we're going to utilize them just in general, but also definitely within the tax function as well. But prompt engineering, it introduces a new dynamic to think about. If you do adopt these tools and integrate them into your process, or make them available to your staff in order to help them and drive them efficiencies, like if they're not getting the desired result, then they have to go through a debug process to figure out, well, what's wrong? Is the prompt wrong? Like in our example, the prompt, we had what I would consider 2 bad prompts and a good prompt, but nothing else changed. The language model was the same. The data was the same, but the prompt changed and I got the desired output. And so I think this kind of introduces a new dynamic for us, because when you change the prompt, you get a different answer. But what happens when you think you do have a good prompt, but you're not getting the response to it that you want? Does that mean you need to change the model, or does the model need to be updated, or data? So it really creates a new tension or thing for us to think through as for people who are using these models. In other words, we think these tools are very transformative, but it's a transformative technology, but it's really it's transforming your people as well. If you think about it, like the prompts are what are changing, the people are changing the prompts. You may even have programs that are changing the prompts for you so that you can get the desired output. So these are new things to be thinking about, how this is interplays with using these tools within your practice. So in other words, let's say you're interested in putting these tools to work for your practice. Well, if you give it a bad prompt, do you just throw it out immediately? Do you try again? So these are the things that we need to think about and consider. And what elements do you change? Change the prompt, change the model, or change the data that you're giving it, or the data that it has access to get a different answer.
Yeah, and that's really helpful. And we're about halfway through, and so I guess you've talked about changing the prompt, but if we go back to your prompt engineering definition, like we ran into a hurdle, right?
Yes.
And you were very helpful and insightful in providing what you define as prompt engineering, but it seemed like a straightforward prompt. Like I don't know how
Yep.
else you would be able to redefine that. So what would be the next step that you would try to do?
Yeah, in that case, the easiest thing for the user to change is the prompt. So it's looking at the prompt and then drafting, or kind of creating a new response for it that's there. That's really the easiest thing for the user to change. The other side of it is, as you get to a more mature state, you can change the data that's there, but largely you may not want to change the large language model or fine tune that model. That's kind of more of an advanced functionality that goes in with it. But this is an example of changing data. So like in this case, we go back to the original prompt and I say, please provide a definition for prompt engineering. Now, what's changed in this is I'm still using GPT-4, but you can see on the graphic there that I've a plugin from ChatGPT-4 called web browsing. Now, the solution says, I know what prompt engineering is because I'm able to go out and gather information from the web regarding what prompt engineering is, and more or less educate itself on what prompt engineering is, and then provide a response to the user. So in this case, it says prompt engineering refers to the process of crafting and refining. Again, huge part there. Crafting and refining, you can create one, but then you may not be the one that you ultimately use to get your desired output. So there is a manual element here of refining, but refining prompts to elicit specific responses from a model like GPT-3 or other AI systems. And so now this is an example where the model GPT-4 didn't change. Essentially, we didn't add to its knowledge base, but we gave it another knowledge base, another large language model, or another language model for it to look at in the data that it's pulling from the web. It's able to take that and then generate a response for what we want to see. And so this is really kind of a key aspect for us in terms of how you get into how do you utilize these, and what would be the right way or approach to put this within your practice. Well, part of it is if you don't have the right data, getting the right data to help generate the responses. That's one lever that you can pull. The prompt's another lever that you can pull, but also the large language model is another one that you can pull as well.
But again, I mean, even appreciating that, you're now saying, okay, I'm searching the web. What is the underlying source, right? There's no footnotes or source of saying,
Yep.
okay.
Well, in this example, there's not, but in terms of other language models, they do reference the sources whenever they pull these things that are there, and that's actually a decent a good use case for it. So from like a custom implementation of these, if you can tell the sources to say, hey, cite your sources for you. So when you pull this information, so you can go through and validate the things that you want to validate based off of that. But some models will do that kind of natively, and then others you'll have to request that's there as part. Again, goes back to your prompt. If you want an answer, it gives you an answer. But if you want an answer and cite your sources or show your work, like your teacher might used to tell you, then you have to tell it, you have to prompt it to do that. And then, over time, as more and more adoption uses this, the language models will, they will make changes to kind of adapt to this dynamic. If they're starting to see a lot more questions that are, not including things that they should be, like we saw in some of our prompts originally, they might change that in order to be a little bit more responsive to their end users' request. And so really, I mean, this is, if we look forward to, where are we going to be a year from now? There's still a lot of unknowns with that looking forward. But one of the things that I think will be there is that as generative AI becomes more mainstream, even within the tax function, that this is going to be a new skill set for our people to master. Like I said, it's not transforming. The technology is transformative, but the reality of it is that people are going to need to learn what type of term searches did they put in there, what type of things did they put into the model to get the desired results that they want. So like if we look at this scale right here, let's say just getting access to a large language model makes you a little 30% more efficient. Well, you may not be able to change the language model or may not want to change the language model, but you add additional training to either individuals on your team or within the language model itself, so that you can advance your efficiencies with this and move up the scale from say 30 to 60 to 90. So I think these tools introduce a new dynamic for our people to be looking at, so for learning and education, you're starting to see, in addition to large language models and AI everything coming out, you're also seeing prompt engineering as a teaching course for a lot of these things. So as prompt engineering 101 and other things come out, these may be training paths that you're going to see and that you may want to invest some time in to really help drive some efficiencies if you choose to adopt these types of tools within your practice. So
it's going to be interesting as we launch the next polling question. As far as like the next generation, at the bottom of resumes, we always see like skills that people have. I'm waiting for people to say like, I am an expert generative AI prompt writer,
yes.
or I'm able to engineer it. But with that, let's open up the second polling question, which is, do you see holding prompt engineering training with your tax practice in the next 6 months? Yes, but not in the next 6 months, or no. Obviously, this is something that people are going to need to be on top of in some fashion. Now, it may be too soon for some to early adopt, and that's going to obviously be something that takes into account. But it is one of those things that this is, at least Cody, from what I'm seeing, where the market is moving to, right? As we mentioned at the outset, everyone is doing generative AI in some fashion, and you may be interacting with generative AI even without knowing about it.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, it's definitely the area where you're going. So it's one of those, it's definitely something that you want to be looking into and be thinking about it, because, like I said, it's gonna be impacting tax compliance. It's gonna be impacting tax professionals in a variety of different ways. And so we would jump into talk a little bit about those ways and hopefully offer some kind of practical guidance along those lines. So like, how are generative AI, how will it impact the tax practice? Well, and tax professionals. So what we're seeing now is these are just 3 software providers that are providing software solutions that are out there. I mean, everyone's very familiar with Microsoft over there on the left with Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. These are tools that are used daily by tax professionals and loved very, very dearly by tax professionals. And the reality of it is Microsoft is taking the generative AI tools and they're integrating those into that platform. So if you'll be able to generate insights and do things within documents, within Excel, within PowerPoint, all in the near future. I checked before this presentation. We had to have our slides finalize in advance, and and then I went and checked today. I was like, maybe they've had a release date for the Microsoft Copilot and Windows Copilot, still scheduled for this fall, but they're rapidly integrating it into those tools. And I was at the Alteryx user conference this year, and Alteryx even released Aiden, which is their generative AI tool. So if your company is invested in Alteryx for automation within the tax function, which we see is pretty common, you're now going to have generative AI tools or capabilities within Alteryx. So if you've invested in these automation tools and you have very specific automations that run for your practice, now maybe there's a use case for you to look at adding in some generative content or insights to that, or not just does the workflow accomplish the means that you're looking for, but it also can now generate memos about what it's doing within the workflows to help explain that to other folks who may or may not know what these tools are. So one of the things that I've seen in tax professionals is as they use new tools, people who are not trained on those new tools are skeptical about how they work, and they want to see things done the old way. And so these are using generative AI tools. These are capabilities to kind of keep parity between what people know and appreciate versus otherwise.
Yeah, and Cody, sorry, just to chime in, we have about 10 more minutes before Kevin shows us Answer Connect, but we've gotten a few questions from the audience that I thought are relevant, especially as you're talking about tax tools and how they're being used, which is, you know, in your example, there was that knowledge cutoff that referred to September 2021, and people were asking questions of, oh, okay, well, when do they ever update it? How often do they update it? When will we know that they've updated it? And, you know, what are the underlying servers or sources that ChatGPT is using? Or how do we even determine, if I wasn't using ChatGPT but some other generative AI, what servers it's using to, do I trust its content?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. And so, yeah, I mean, typically in terms of a refresh rate, you're seeing things move very quickly right now in terms of the knowledge set that they're training these tools off of. Usually this is, you know, done in like, you know, kind of a monthly or quarterly update that's there. But typically the way to ask or to find out of this is to prompt these tools to tell you what sources that they're looking for, and they'll tell you based off of when the knowledge cutoff is that's there. Now, as you move to a more mature setup for this, you can take kind of a combination of things, which is say like ChatGPT on one side, or a large language model of your choice on one side, and another language model that's maybe smaller subset, but that's proprietary to the organization that you're in. So, and then there's orchestrating tools that will take prompts and say, okay, well, I want to go figure out, I need to go search our data set, which exists on our servers, and then I want to come up with a response from that data set using the ChatGPT language model. So it's using kind of a hybrid of different sources to come up with the content that's there. So, but as this matures, this is part of what you'll see. You know, as we'll see this in the next slide. Don't jump there just yet. But you know, as you set up your infrastructure to handle these, this will be where you're going to keep your information. So your proprietary data should exist within your system and your servers. And then depending on your organization's policy and how you set this up, it would either be communicating with ChatGPT or other large language models, and or bringing that instance within a cloud-based platform that your organization has invested in and secured. So as a journey like what we're seeing now, Microsoft Azure, which is their cloud-based platform that a lot of infrastructure is set up on, we're seeing that that you can take those models and be hosted within that infrastructure that's there. So it's within your cloud instance and all set up. So, but that's part of the journey of getting set up that's there too. And then one other thing just on this real fast to mention is, so Avalara, sales and use tax provider, they just released I believe last week or maybe a couple weeks ago that they have a sales tax plugin for ChatGPT. So if you're using those, you can now log into ChatGPT and blend ChatGPT's large language model data along with the Avalara sales and use tax and ask questions about things that you'd like to see.
Yeah, and so we're gonna go a little out of order, Cody, and we're gonna launch our third polling question before we go to the last slide, which is, would you be interested in a more in-depth discussion about generative AI tools, technology, or strategy for your tax practice with the practitioners? Yes or no? Obviously, we're happy to talk to you about anything that we've been discussing. While they're answering that, and Cody, I realize, prompting is a term of art and it's always being refined. We got a question from the audience about what are your thoughts on the role task format RTF framework for prompting? Is that, depending on the platform you're using, is that something that you would potentially suggest, or is it really a case by case basis?
So I think that for that specifically, I think right now everything's kind of a case by case basis that's there. So I'd like to see what exactly you're trying to accomplish with that, and then how you would put together those RTF and framework and so forth for prompting. But I mean, we're like, with respect to prompting as well, we're seeing that a lot of folks are doing a little bit, you can be doing this manually. You can actually set up processes where the AI tools are prompting for you on your behalf to help break that down. So it's really, for all of these things right now, I'd really take it on a case by case basis and see how we can test and put that in a proper place for you.
Great.
And lastly, just really wanted to kind of cover some high points that are here for like the generative AI tools and technology, but really kind of laying a foundation for this. And then part of this is, where do you start? So, and I think where would you start? And if you're interested in this journey and interested in tinkering with these tools, is I'd say you really should start with a policy. Like, look at like what should your policy? Should you be using these? What's the policy within your organization? Obviously you probably don't want to be sending off your data, logging into these tools and sending off your data to unknown source, or a source outside of your organization. So you need to come up with a policy, whether that's enforced from IT security, or if that's something that is just a do's and don'ts that's communicated to the tax practice. And then, from and the other side of that too is, from a policy perspective, we've been hinting at this a lot, but there are risks to these tools. The answers and the responses are not guaranteed. They're often disclaimers in there to, if you do ask it tax questions, to seek a tax professional to get your final answer. So these are things that you need to be thinking about and putting in place in order to help, to really help conduct or use or adopt these tools in a safe and effective manner. And then, really the next one is process. Good technology follows good process. That's just true all the time. So if you're not sure like what your process looks like or how it is, or coming up with the use cases that you can put a definition on, those are really going to be the key areas that I think will be helpful for you to focus in. And so have a good policy, have a good process, or know what your process is and how you plan to incorporate generative AI into the compliance process. And strategy. Like if you're thinking, man, there's a lot of buzz about these tools, but I have no idea how to use or utilize those, then bring somebody in to help thinking about how you can bring these into your organization and use these in an effective way. There is strategy for this. We've seen some of the dynamics with prompting and how you would set it up and how would you set your prompting up. So that's a big dynamic, and I think that's also a shifting dynamic too. So how we prompt today may be different of how we prompt 6 months from now. So these are things to be thinking about, and having some strategic help with that is always a good case. And then lastly, this is the big one, security. So like you have policies within your organization, so you don't need to be violating those policies, and you need to make sure that you have all your ducks in order to tinker and work with these tools in a safe and effective way. One of the things that we did first for our organization is we really took a long time looking at the security and the strategy process before we started tinkering with these. Like, we need to make sure that this is safe, secure, how we're going to utilize this within our organization, and really kind of set it as a way to grow. And then, and that's really kind of the first point to get off the ground. Is to really have these things in place so that there's confidence that your risk is appropriately managed and that you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's really a big thing, because you can see how there could be a lot of concern as generative AI continuously evolves, and in part it utilizes the user experience in formulating, its next prompt. As we've talked about, that if I send the same prompt, 4 times in a row, I won't necessarily get the same answer, because it's continuously improving, as well as how the technology is hitting the words that you wrote on the page.
Yeah.
And so you could see, like, okay, if I'm doing research on a company, or I'm trying to, have information about one of my clients, how much of that do I want out there? How much of it am I able to control? And that security point is really key in making sure that the organizations appreciate, what is the role, what are the policies, so that way, hey, I just, compare my tax returns, and then all of a sudden the taxpayer data is now on the internet, right? That's not what you want.
Yeah, that's exactly those, and that's where you want to, before you start building upon the foundation, you want to make sure that you're not on shifting sands or anything along those lines. You're in a good spot. But the other side of it is, once you are comfortable and you are secure, the encouragement here is to to try these tools out, see where there's use cases for you within your compliance process to help drive efficiencies and create greater impact.
Great. Well, Cody, thanks for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. It was definitely informative. Our contact information is at the back of the deck. Feel free to reach out to us with any follow-up questions. Apologies if we couldn't get to all of the questions we got asked. But Kevin, what can you tell us about Answer Connect?
Yeah, really excited to be able to spend a couple of minutes on that. Really interesting on what AI is looking like and what it's going to do in the future of the industry. Wolters Kluwer, with our CCH Answer Connect, has actually done quite a bit of work with AI initially when we launched it, and how we actually generate information in searches and how we bring that content to you. One of the polling questions, number 3, was, what should it look like going forward? So we're really excited for those of you that actually volunteered to say we'd love to have some discussions with you, reach out to you and just find out what your vision of AI within tax research would look like going forward. I'm going to use a couple of examples here based on Cody and Kevin's presentation regarding bonus depreciation, and really how we at CCH, through CCH Answer Connect, pull together all of this information for you in terms of a tax research platform. We're also going to talk about that plugin. I know it was mentioned regarding Avalara platform, but this again is something that we've had in place for several years that will actually allow the researcher, when they do begin to use this ChatGPT and some of these AI systems outside of a tax research platform, to be able to validate, verify. We saw the date restrictors, September of 21. What's happened since then? Has the information been made up? How do you actually go about validating that specific information? So as we take a look at CCH Answer Connect right now, I'm just going to use that same example of bonus depreciation. And this is where the internal AI, the term of art I think Kevin used, we've built into CCH Answer Connect, where we're beginning to drive a tax researcher into relevant content, whether it's a quick answer where you can get some of that information regarding the bonus depreciation, or our ability to drive the tax researcher directly into a topic page where we're going to give you the in-depth analysis regarding the specific issue, or some of the suggested search pieces that we have based again on that AI, the editorial input that our team puts forward to the researcher to drive you to information. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this topic page, walk through this piece of information here as it relates to a tax research workflow to ensure that you're seeing all relative current information, which is always the biggest fear as you're doing tax research. Is what I'm looking at current, accurate, up to date? So we talked about all the different phase out pieces of the bonus depreciation, very included in the very first paragraph here as it relates to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 and what all of that information looks like. Using this navigation bar on the left-hand side, are there bonus rates, election out of the bonus? How do you calculate all of this? The information available, the recapture, other issues. If there are any other recommended topics that you need to take a look at, like for example, what property qualifies for bonus depreciation. All of that information has been compiled for you into a single location. So if you would have started out in the web, you still have this information within CCH all compiled for you together. We then bring in the key primary sources, where again, the editorial team is driving you to this information to give you the up-to-date or to allow you to validate what you've seen using one of the AI tools that are outside of CCH Answer Connect currently. Client letters, smart charts, practice aids, again, all of that information being aggregated into a single location so that as a researcher, you're able to get to that information very, very quickly. We're going to go into our key primary sources here, and again, just expand a little bit further on how the organization of the code section analysis comes about, using what we've entitled our 360 view, moving from left to right across these tabs, where we're now allowing you to, again, go through the process of research in a trusted source, known source from the Internal Revenue Code, to all of the regulations related to Code Section 179, explanations, cases, rulings, guidance, all of your forms, your tools, the ability to go in and take a look at what a given state has to say regarding the specific code section. Has there been an adoption? Has there been a modification? But again, the ability to allow the researcher to have all of that information in one place. I'm actually going to hop out of CCH Answer Connect really quickly here, and I'm actually going to go into ChatGPT. We saw some of the wonderful things it can do. We also saw some of the pitfalls in the presentation. For this example, what I've actually done is done a search within ChatGPT, or what are the current bonus depreciation rules? And they've put together some really good information here. We noticed though that the caveat is it hasn't been updated in 16 months at this point. So is this information still accurate? Is it still valid? Can you rely on it? One of the things that we've had in place with our browser plugin is the ability to simply highlight terms within any document on the web and right click. You can then go directly to CCH Answer Connect through our browser search plugin that will then run that search within CCH Answer Connect, driving the user back to that same topic page that we came from within CCH Answer Connect, again, to just be able to validate with what's been put together within these AI tools is either still valid or has it been modified since September 21st, September of 2021. Again, just a great way to be able to utilize that tool, but still be able to come back into a research provider to validate the accuracy of that information. So again, I want to thank you for my couple of minutes. Would love to have some further discussions with any of you if you're interested regarding the future of AI within CCH Answer Connect, or further discussion on CCH Answer Connect itself. So with that, Margaret, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the final polling question today.
Thank you, Kevin. We have the final polling question up on the screen right now. We want to thank everyone. That wraps up today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. CP credits will be posted within 2 to 4 business days. You will receive an email with the link to the course evaluation and your certificate of completion. Today's webinar has been recorded. You will receive an email with access to the link of the recording. Thank you for attending and have a great day.